Hello, and welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
This podcast is your go-to source for the weird, the unexplained, the unsolved, the solved, the things that piss us off, the things that should piss you off, things that are mysterious or haunted or haunting. I think that's a good one.
Haunted. Yeah, there we go.
Haunted or haunting, because some of the stuff we talk about...
and truly haunting.
it will chill you. So, who are you?
Oh, thank you for asking.
Tag. You're at.
I am Shannon Lawrence. I am writer and podcaster. Go figure. I realized that I can add that to my bio.
Yeah, I'm just going, oh yeah, I guess I could say that.
Right. So, yay. And student.
Yes.
Full frickin' time. I'm currently taking a IT management class.
I am so sorry.
And it's supposed to be an intro, and they're like, the first lesson is all, here's how to build a network. And I'm like, oh, shit. All right. But anyway, yeah, I really have nothing to say about myself other than all that right now. What about you? Who are you? Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?
My name is Emmy Partlow, and I have defeated the security measures to access Shannon's Fortress of Power. Fortress of Solitude.
Welcome.
Who am I? I wish I knew. It's still the beginning of the year. I haven't figured out which personality is going to be dominant yet.
For the year?
For the year. I'm a writer. I'm a retail worker. I'm a chief cook and bottle washer at my house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am not a cryptozoologist. Nor have I played one
now
on
you
TV.
never should look up how to do it. You should just always introduce yourself as not a cryptozoologist.
I think I will start doing that.
All right. And I am an amateur one.
An amateur.
I'm an amateur one. And I have been since I was young. Who knows what an amateur is?
I don't know. Perhaps one of our thousands of listeners will look it up and report back to us.
Not I.
That's what I do on my Facebook Lives. So in my other life, as a retail worker, I do Facebook Lives for the shop that I work for, which I find hilarious because I'm talking about clothes and fashion, which if you could see me right now, you would know how funny that was. But I'll say something. I'll be like, oh, look, it's got these little ruffly bits here. Can someone tell me what they're called? And someone who is watching will type in, those are called pin tucks or whatever.
Wow.
I've learned a lot.
I bet.
I just make shit up and then say, if I'm wrong, please correct me. And people are happy to.
Oh, yeah, that's the first thing. I was like, that'll be the first email we ever get. It's somebody correcting something that we've said. In the last episode, said I was bitchy and bitter about the horror community.
Yes, you
horror
did.
world. And I just wanted to mention it's February, so it's Women in Horror Month. Which, since I've actually thought of that ahead of time, maybe I'll actually be able to pull off something. And I always, like, every year it sneaks up on me because it's the holidays in January, and I'm like, I should do some things for Women in Horror Month, and then I don't.
Now you have plenty of warning.
Sure.
We'll just go with that.
This month, that's not enough warning.
What have you been watching? You watched any good movies lately?
Movies. I watched WW84 Wonder Woman.
Oh, how
84.
was it?
I liked it. I've seen people complaining about it, but I mean, it's Wonder Woman-y. It's true to the character. I liked it.
I want to see it. I haven't, but I don't have. Did you have to have HBO to watch it?
Yeah.
Which I do not.
Yeah.
I might get HBO.
I mean, there's a bunch of good, so you can watch Lovecraft Country too on there.
Yeah.
I've been watching just going through, like, I'm going to lose it at any minute. I'm watching things on there because I just got access to it. And then I watched a horror movie on Shudder called Anything for Jackson, which was creepy as hell.
Anything for Jackson?
Yeah, it's a couple who lost, as far as I can tell, both their daughter and their grandson, and they're Satanists. And you wouldn't know it at the beginning. It's just this mundane older couple, and they kidnap a pregnant woman because they want to bring Jackson back through her
Not their
baby.
daughter, but their grandson.
Yeah. So I don't know why they're like, well, fuck her daughter. But anyway, there are some great... again, it's put forward as this quiet older couple, right? And that's how they act throughout it. Is they're sorry we have to do this to you, but anything for a grandson, thus the name. And then there are some absolutely gory and creepy moments that it doubles in size because of the surroundings,
You also watched another movie, because after you mentioned it, I watched it.
What?
Suburban Gothic.
Oh yeah, I didn't watch that recently though. I watched that a couple of years ago.
Oh,
but I watched it on Shudder, and then I posted when it was on Hulu, so I figured more people could watch it.
Oh my God, Suburban Gothic isn't it great? So fucking weird and creepy and funny.
It's the guy from
Ray
Criminal
Wise.
Minds. Yes, Criminal Minds.
Oh wait.
He's the little nerdy guy on Criminal Minds.
Oh, okay.
I haven't watched that in forever either.
Ray Wise is the dad.
Oh.
He was also on Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay.
Which is where he first... But he has played Satan a couple of times.
And Kat Dennison.
Yes, I love her.
Yeah.
I love her.
So, now that you've seen it, I can say, I have this... the one thing that will crack me up, bar none, is a man screaming like a girl in a comedic fashion. Not in a, he's being tortured and it's terrible. That's not going to make me laugh. I'm not that twisted. And he has this scene where he's just like... Ah! And I just laugh.
The dad has some of the funniest lines.
It's clever. It's witty. Yeah.
I can't even repeat one of them. But I laughed so hard. We know you have a more European sense of style, fashion.
Yes.
Can we pay you to wear more normal clothes? And he's like, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. His responses to his parents, too, are great.
Oh, my God. It's a bizarre little movie, but it's well worth the watch.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
I've watched it a couple times since I watched it on there the first time.
I also watched The Expendables 3.
How did you feel?
I started watching Expendables 2 because I thought I'd only watched the first one. Mm-hmm. But I had watched 1 and 2, so I was like, oh, no, I'll see if I can find 3. And it was okay. It's a over-the-top action, and I can't remember if it was Joe or Nikki who walked through the room, and I'm like, and there's this scene where somebody drives a motorcycle up a girder into a building, and I'm like, because that's how physics works ever.
But that's the point, is it's a callback to the 80s and 90s action flicks.
And Antonio Banderas was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. The thing is, though, he does have a good sense of humor, and he has been funny in movies. It's just, when he started, I don't even think he really spoke English when he started in American films, right? And so the more he learned that and the more he got comfortable with it, the more his humor started showing through and things.
Yeah, I thought he was absolutely hilarious.
I grew up on all these action flicks, so I loved the Expendables movie. So they talked about doing an Expendables, which is going to be an all-female.
I would probably watch that.
Well, I think it's just disappeared. And here's the thing. They were casting it. I had completely different people in mind for who I considered to be women who were classically classic action actors, right? And for me, the female action movies really started with, you've got Sigourney Weaver in the Alien films. You've got, what's her name? Linda Hamilton?
Yep.
From the Terminator films. Mila Jovovich from Resident Evil and Fifth Element. So those are the people I'm thinking of. Maggie Q, stuff like that.
Yeah. And
when they'd started casting it, it was like female wrestlers. I said, no, this is not the same thing as you did with Expendables. You didn't. No. These aren't the people that we've been watching, that we watched for, decades in action films, like Schwarzenegger and Stallone and all these people. So anyway, it just dropped off the face of the earth. So I don't know if too many people didn't like who they were casting, or...
Although all I could think was how old Harrison Ford looked.
Aww.
But there were some outrageous callbacks, because this is the one Wesley Snipes is in.
Yeah.
And they rescue him. This movie's been out, so spoilers.
Not a spoiler.
Galore. But when they say something like, well, what were you in prison for? And he straight face says tax evasion.
I know. Let's just put it right out there. This is what he was really in trouble for.
Yeah, but there were a couple of callbacks like that because it's Schwarzenegger just chomping on a cigar. It looks like he just had a blast.
is it the first one or the second one where they really focus on Mickey Rourke?
I don't remember. I think the first one.
I just remember, that it had been a while since seeing his acting chops. And I think that in movies, he was selected for being a pretty face for the longest time, right? And then in this, he really got to act, which is funny because this is it's a mindless action flick, really. But his role was good.
So for the first few minutes of the movie, of course, I'm on my phone going, how old is Sylvester Stallone? How old is Jason Statham? How old is Wesley? Because I'm like, I wanted to compare how old everybody was.
Statham's got to be one of the younger ones, or the youngest one.
Well, yeah, that's number 3 is where they get the kids in, but
that's right.
Super young one.
That's right. One of the Hemsworth brothers. Is that 3 or 2?
I think that was 2.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, they all blend together because I haven't watched them in a while, but I've been meaning to watch them.
And I just watched it last night.
Jet Li in the first one is hysterical.
Yes.
I need more pay because I am smaller. I have to work harder. Just rag on it all the time.
It really is kind of a romp. I mean, there are senseless action movies that I don't enjoy because it's like they made no effort to have a plot that flows from point A to point B. And I'm like, I can forgive the over-the-top action sequences if there's some good humor in it and there is a plot.
Yeah.
That moves from point A to point B.
I watched an old Charles Bronson flick that I hadn't watched in forever.
Oh my God.
I think it's called, 10 to Midnight.
Okay.
And I think it was inspired by Bundy's rampage on a sorority, and the sorority house is there at the end of his, But it was pretty good. The guy goes after his daughter, so that's how it ends. But there at the end, it's a bunch of nurses living together that he goes after.
Oh,
So we do the weekly movie night with my kids, and basically we've been having to watch all the old stuff that we loved, and we had watched Mummy. So our next few weeks are going to be like girl power action flicks. We started with Fifth Element.
I saw that you watched that.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I don't care what anyone says.
Well, people hate on Chris Tucker's character, but the thing is, he's supposed to be obnoxious, and he is entertaining as hell. And again,
he is.
Man screaming like a girl for a vast amount of time in that movie. He's fucking hysterical. Anyway, I will defend Ruby Rod forever. I know, but people hate him. People will not watch that movie because he's obnoxious.
You know,
and I'm like, well,
I think why some people hate on him? I'm going to go out on a limb. Here we go. I mean, he's going to plummet to the earth. I think it's because some of his mannerisms are what would be called effeminate. What would be labeled, because his dress and his voice, but he's also very sexualized. And he's not... He's just super appealing to women. Yeah. I mean, the women just faint.
They absolutely shiver when he talks to them.
And then when he touches them, it's just... anyway, I think that bothers a lot of people, that he's not Bruce Willis. He's the very opposite end of the spectrum from Bruce Willis, yet he's so immensely attractive. I'm not saying that's everybody.
Yeah, who are the women falling over themselves for? Ruby Rod. Are we green? But yeah, so we're watching that. We're gonna watch some other stuff.
Cool.
But I haven't watched that in a little bit. It's always a good movie. I rewatched it a billion freaking times.
Yes, I always multi-pass.
And Bruce Willis looks like he's on the verge of laughing throughout the whole thing. And apparently I read in the trivia yesterday, because that's the thing I do after I watch a movie now, is just go look up the trivia. And I guess there's a scene, if I go back and watch it, where he's struggling to not laugh behind Ruby Rod while he's doing something. So yeah,
everything. Chris Tucker just burst onto the scene.
He's all in. Oh, that's the thing. I think
role.
he missed his calling to be an auctioneer. He talks so fast.
Yes.
At certain points, and I'm like, holy crap.
We've started watching things with the subtitles on.
See? Have I talked about that on here or just on Facebook? I highly recommend it. You get to see the goofiest stuff sometimes on those subtitles. We started doing it when we were sitting on the back porch because we didn't want to turn the TV up too much back there.
Which is thoughtful.
And so we were putting on the subtitles. And now they're just on everything that we watch because we got so used to it.
We just, so the new season of Letterkenny, as of when we're recording this, I haven't watched the new season yet. But Nikki and I were watching some of the old stuff to catch up. And she had the subtitles on and I'm like, oh, that is so very helpful because they talk so fucking fast sometimes. It's like, wait, what did he say? Was that an insult? What did he say? Okay.
All right.
And I just discovered, since we were segueing into TV, if you're into true crime, apparently the Oxygen Network is the true crime. I was looking it up. It's got sibling murders. It's got everything, A to Z. And then it's got one show, How to Protect Yourself.
They're like, now that you've listened to all of these murders.
So Thing 2 had her wisdom teeth out between Christmas and New Year's. So she had some, I don't know how much she'll remember because she was taking some of the painkillers, but she just turned on the death channel and let it run. So
I did. I watched my brother's twins when they were little, when they were toddlers, and I stayed over at their house so they were more comfortable, and they had cable. We haven't had cable in forever. We just, and I just instantly went to whatever the channel, Discovery Channel or something that had all the true crime stuff. And it was the one that had Forensic Files, whatever channel it was. I love that man's voice. And I was just like, this will play as soon as the kids go to bed. This is what's on. All right. Well, and so TV shows, speaking of true crime, I've been watching, what is it called?
I don't know.
The Ripper Murders.
Oh,
The Ripper. But it's not about Jack the Ripper. It's about the Ripper in England still. But it was more modern. Yes, it's on Netflix.
The Yorkshire Ripper.
It is. It's not called the Yorkshire Ripper, though.
I'll look up
I think it's the Ripper Murders. But anyway, it's been interesting. I started it the other day while I was doing something, though, and I was like, you can't watch this type of documentary and be doing schoolwork or whatever I was doing. So then I stopped it and restarted a different day.
There are too many details.
And I did finally watch the Goes Wrong show, which was hilarious. I mean, it's stupid as hell. It's all about, it's just they're putting on plays and everything's going wrong and they're having to play along with whatever's happening and cope with it. And then there's this dude who's always like an extra character. He was a fax machine in one of them. He was a moose head. Like a deer head on the wall and another one. But the funniest one of all is called 90 Degrees. And at the very beginning, they're introducing their play, because they always do. And he says, so there was a bit of a misunderstanding with the title. So part of the set is built at 90 degrees to the rest of the set. So these poor people are like, they have to climb. It's a conference room. It's like the dining room or something.
Oh my God.
And they're sitting at the table at 90 degrees. So like, this one woman has long hair and it's just dangling down. And then another guy's at the head of the table, which means he's at the very bottom of the table. And the guy said, would you like some sweet tea?
Oh, no.
Oh, my God. I laughed so hard through that whole thing.
Okay, I'm going to have to watch it.
Yeah, it was on Amazon Prime.
But you are going to have to go back and watch The Wilds, because I finished that.
Oh, yeah, I need to finish it.
Oh, it's like, what just happened here? I got to the end and I was yelling at the TV.
Oh, okay.
Because it was like, wait, what? And it was, I was like, okay, this is obviously the last episode of the season, because there were a couple of things that are just kind of, they were cliched last episode. And I was like, no, what? So, and I wrote Thing 2 into it, so.
It's because it's on Prime, I think, right? And I just haven't gone to Prime when it's just me lately.
It is. So what have you read lately?
Ooh, I read Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family by Robert Kolker, which is, okay, it's something that I avoided because I was tired of hearing about it. Honestly. Because everybody was talking about it. And then I start reading it and I discover it's set in Colorado Springs. I mean, this is where this family lived. They had 12 kids. The youngest 2 were daughters. And of the 10 boys, 6 of them got schizophrenia. And this is back in like the 40s and 50s. They ended up being kind of the backbone of a lot of studies on schizophrenia because they didn't understand it. But here's the thing. I learned so much about neighborhoods I'd lived in that, because where they lived was very familiar to me. Mm-hmm. And then also they lived off of downtown on Cash Laputer. And it was at the time, on an old farm property, and they lived in a converted barn. And then they ended up moving, I think, back to New York. Then they came back and they moved into Woodman Valley, which isn't far from where I am. Yeah. And I always wondered why I went to Air Academy High School. Because, I mean, nobody who doesn't live here is going to understand that I lived over here kind of nearish where I live right now, and yet we were bused to Air Academy High School, which was on the Air Force Academy. Mm-hmm. We weren't military. Well, that's because all of this housing appears to have started, not where I am, because this is much newer, but Woodman Valley and Blodgett Peak area, so whatever that is, Peregrine, was Air Force housing. Oh. It was basically spillover for the families who didn't fit in the housing on the Air Force Academy. So, yeah, and there's a lot about how the Air Force Academy started. This is the family, supposedly, that inspired the Falcon being the mascot of the Air Force Academy because they were falconers. It was a habit, and that's where I learned that they sewed falcon's eyes shut. Yes, it's terrible. They would catch the falcon, they would sew its eyes shut so that it had to become completely dependent on him. That's how they trained it, which I assume now that's what those little leather masks are that we see now instead of sewing a poor bird's eyes shut.
That's
I know. It's not like they put them out. And then eventually they would, open the eyes, but then they were trained to be dependent on the family.
Man, if I was that bird, I would peck the fucking
That's horrible, though. And it was this big hobby for people, They were not a rich family, I will say that. There's just so much to it. There's so much in the family dynamics. When you look at a family of 12, the husband was Catholic, so he was all about quiverful. So she's just popping out babies. Oh. And whenever she was like, I would like you to do something where you stay home and help, so you can be around. And he would go, I have dreams too. And I'm like, why are you saying too, motherfucker? You don't think she had dreams? But they're also a big part of the reason why the arts are such a big thing around here. They actually were the ones, they would bring opera singers and dancers and stuff out here and sponsor them coming out for like a month to do performances, because Colorado Springs is very ripe with the arts, and I've often thought how lucky we are to have this arts community here, including authors, and they're a huge part of the arts part.
Did not know that.
Yeah, that Georgia O'Keeffe, they knew Georgia O'Keeffe. They went down to New Mexico and Abiquiu, New Mexico. I don't know.
Okay, never mind.
But yeah, so it's a fascinating read. I learned a lot about a lot of things that maybe I wasn't supposed to be reading the book for, but that to me I was like, what? Oh, because it's where I live.
Well, yeah.
So it was very interesting, and I have started reading. I'm almost done with White Trash Warlock by David R. Slade. I'm finally reading that.
You like it?
Yes, of course.
Of course you do, because it's a very good book.
And then what books did you read?
I read Naked Came the Florida Man by Tim Dorsey.
The one you thought I'd read.
The one I thought you had read, but you had not.
Nope.
I will say, in all of Dorsey's books that involve Surge and Colvin, there is a lot of Florida history. There is a lot of Florida trivia. And there is a lot of whatever
the theme that is running.
Yeah.
His obsession.
Yeah. Whatever the current events are of the day. This one felt like more history and more trivia and less story. The balance it was still a fine and very amusing read, but that balance just felt off to me.
Okay.
So, because the last one I read by him, which I don't remember the name of, but it involves a retirement village in Florida, loved that one. I thought this is something different. It's a little bit newer. It's got, it's breaking out of the mold a little bit. Loved it. So maybe it was reading these not back to back, because it's been months since I read that one. And I also read a book called Demons, Dolls, and Milkshakes by Nelson W. Piles.
Oh.
It's kind of an interesting take on a demon story. Is
it urban fantasy?
Yes, mostly. I guess I'd have to say it's more horror.
Okay.
But it's a weird kind of, it walks the line between the two of them. I liked it. but it wasn't my favorite book of all time.
Okay.
I mean,
fair enough.
There were some stylistic choices that I didn't agree with, but sometimes it's hard when you write to read somebody else's writing and shut off that inner critic.
Yeah.
So I think that was what I had a hard time doing. But like I said, it was a very different take, and I actually brought it with me. I can leave it for you if you would.
Yay!
I could actually oh no, I can't leave you the Darcy until after the spouse reads it, but
okay. I get it.
and I just started. There's another book I'm reading that's set in like the 1400s, and it's set in Italy, and it's set in Vatican City, and it's sort of a mystery and sort of a romance about the guy who's the head chef for the Pope.
Nope.
But I'm rapidly losing my sympathy. I'm probably going to insult somebody. I'm rapidly like the author, who I can't remember who it was. I'm losing my sympathy for these characters because it's the nephew inherits. His uncle was the chef, the Pope's chef, and he dies. So the nephew inherits everything, and he gets offered the position because he's been training with his uncle. And he finds his uncle's diary, and he's reading them. So it goes back and forth between the nephew reading them and when his uncle was actually living it. So you got that little time hop back and forth. Come to find out, the nephew is actually his son, not his nephew. But they just keep fucking killing people with no remorse. And I'm like, although I will say my niece, Song, mentioned, think about this. Back then, if you were in a marriage that was repugnant to you, what option did you have? You couldn't get divorced.
Nope.
You couldn't leave unless you wanted to be destitute. So she's like, what other... So I had to think about that, but it's still the fact that the people who are committing the murders just are fucking tra-la-la along and don't... It's their right because they're doing it for love.
Oh. Bully for them.
I'm like, maybe somebody loved that Pope you just killed.
That's funny. That kind of applies to...
right?
Episode,
our topic.
Now, what were all the holidays that... Because it was days. I mean, not just Valentine's Day.
Oh, I don't...
It was...
Oh, there is such a list. I am the resident holiday person. I'm always keeping track of... What is today? Today is National Chocolate Covered Cherry Day when we're recording this. Your phone is faster than mine.
National Mend a Broken Heart Month.
Yes.
Relationship Wellness Month.
International Boost Self-Esteem Month.
So all these things that have to do with National Have a Heart Day.
Oh, and the 7th through the 14th is National Marriage Week.
I like Desperation Day on the 13th. That's great. Madly Fall in Love Day is the 13th.
I thought we should do something for February 8th, which is Laugh and Get Rich Day. I want to know how to achieve that.
Shower with a Friend Day is the 5th. So,
right?
That's important. So anyway, we decided with all of these kind of themes around that we would do the show toward that. And actually, it's about time to start
to launch into some of that.
After I edit out that
long
silence while we looked at what it was.
Flip.
Crap. Give me a second. Okay. So I decided, and this one isn't so much something that people haven't heard of, except that I'd heard of them a billion times. There's movies that are based off of them, but I didn't really know their full story.
Oh, okay.
So this is the spree killers Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate. Charles Starkweather was born November 24th, 1938 in Lincoln, Nebraska, to a carpenter who missed chunks of work due to rheumatoid arthritis. Say that 5 times fast. And his mom, who worked as a waitress whenever his father was out of work. It was the Great Depression. His family often struggled with money. Starkweather had been born with something called genu varum, a birth defect that caused disfigurement of his legs. He pretty much had severely bowed legs, I guess. And he had a speech impediment. So both of these things combined caused him to be bullied. Before he dropped out of school at the age of 16, he became physically strong and big, turned on his bullies. He was able to dominate them in athletics and elsewhere. And he very much then adapted this attitude of I'm going to, all right, well, the world's had their time with me. I'm going to start reflecting this back on people. What I found kind of horrifying is that I kind of reached that point with bullies. And it was, all right, well, then if you're going to continue treating me this way, then I'm going to just be the first one to get you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't go on a spree killing then. Because sometimes it's a point, I know, that you reach, right? It'll be planned. Once he left school, he took a job for the Western Union newspaper warehouse loading lorries, which I didn't know there was a Western Union newspaper, but okay.
I didn't either.
His employers considered him to be dumb and lazy, often telling him repeatedly to do something. In 1956, at 18, he met Caril and Fugate, who was only 13. Her older sister had dated him in school, and she was the one who introduced them, which is like, really? This is your fault.
But it's like, was she trying to hook him up, or was it like, oh, hey,
this is my baby sister who you couldn't possibly be interested in because she's about 5 years younger than us or whatever. He began visiting her each day after school, taught her to drive. The car that he taught her driving was his father's, and she actually ended up wrecking it, hitting somebody. And
of course,
his dad paid for it because it was registered to him and everything like that. But then he was obviously upset about it, and they fought about it a lot. The dad actually ended up kicking him out of the house.
Wow.
He switched jobs and he started working as a refuse collector. I like how then it's like lorry driver, refuse collector.
Yes.
And these are, this is in America. He loved the film Rebel Without a Cause, and he started dressing and acting like James Dean's character in it. He also started checking out banks on his garbage routes, thinking, you know what, I can't make any real money doing this. And, he'd grown up poor. His jobs weren't paying him much, so he's like, all right, I'm going to rob these.
Why not?
Why not?
As one does.
He was, at this point, incredibly angry at the world. He saw himself as having been victimized repeatedly by those around him. He felt that his poverty had, he had been victimized in his poverty. He developed an incredibly short temper, and he was just overall angry about stuff. His personal philosophy became, dead people are all on the same level. Okay. I guess it's the death is the great equalizer, right? He left a life of crime, or he felt a life of crime was his only option. And the funny thing is, he's casing the banks. I don't think he never actually robbed a bank. What happened instead is November 30th, 1957. So, let's see, 19. He tried to buy a stuffed animal on credit at a service station. Robert Culvert, the attendant, refused to extend him credit. I assume this was a big one and that it must have been for Caril Ann, because I don't see why he might be all determined to buy a stuffed animal for himself. After returning multiple times and buying small items, Starkweather finally, sacked up, I guess. And he pulled a shotgun, forced Culvert to give him $100 from the till, drove him to a different location. They fought over the gun, and Starkweather won, so he shot and killed Robert Culvert in the early morning hours of December 1st and left his body out there. January 21st, 1958, so just a few months later, Starkweather goes to Fugate's house to pick her up. Her mother and stepfather refused to let her go with him, so he shot and killed both of them, plus her 2-year-old half-sister.
Oh my God.
Betty Jean Bartlett. So I'm going to just start it here. Fugate told a different story. She always maintained that she had come home from school and just found him there with the house empty, and then discovered that he'd killed her family, that she felt she didn't have any recourse. She was scared. She was a hostage. She didn't know what he'd do to her. They actually stayed there in the house, 6 days with those bodies. When relatives came to the door, she'd tell them that they had the flu, that they couldn't come to the door. She ultimately put out a note. Here's the thing. The note said, "Stay away. Everybody is sick with the flu." Flu spelled with an E at the end. Signed, Miss Bartlett. There was only one Miss Bartlett in the house. She was still Caril Ann Fugate. Her mother was Mrs. Bartlett. The little girl was Miss Bartlett. So she underlined Miss Bartlett twice. She said that it was her call for help. So if somebody came to the door, they'd know that was strange, right? So anyway, of the people who knocked on the door and were turned away, it included her sister. So I guess she had an older sister, her grandma, other relatives, and uncle, I think. Oh my God. All these people coming by. I'm like, wow, this was an active house with lots of visits. Her grandma became really suspicious, and she threatened to call the police, and that's when the two fled. They left the house. They fled to Bennett, Nebraska, to his friend's house. Now, several sources, the sources were all over the place on whose friend this was. It sounds to me, gathering from them, that it was actually Starkweather's, a family friend of Starkweather's.
Okay.
Because the man was 70 years old. His name was August Meyer. And in one, it said it was her friend of the family, but that it doesn't make sense with anything to me. So anyway, they go to his house. He lives on a farm. Their car gets stuck in the mud on the property, and he offers to get the horses out to help haul the car out of the mud.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. So they go, which is funny because then several of the sources, I kept pulling up new sources trying to find a concrete answer, and they were like, their car got stuck afterwards. And I'm like, then why did they go to the stable? So again, I'm picking the thing that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, they go out to the stable, and Starkweather shoots the old man, and then he beats his dog to death with the shotgun so violently he breaks the shotgun.
Oh my God.
Right. And why? There's no why. There's no
reason to shoot to no.
No, so I choose to believe. Nobody said this. This is my theory.
Okay.
I'm just going to put that out there. I'm assuming that the poor dog tried to defend its owner.
That makes sense.
And so that's why he beat the dog. So I'm going to say good dog. Good dog. Fugate would later say this attack was completely unexpected to her, that it just came out of nowhere. She just thought they were going there for safety, and out of nowhere he brutally murders this man and his dog. And this, she said, was what solidified for her, bearing in mind I think she just turned 14. That she had no chance to fight against him, and she needed to just go along with whatever he said. It's going to be highly disputed. I'm going to go over that later, but I'm going to put in how she said it. A young couple named Robert Jensen and Caril King see the couple stranded. They're walking along the road. They offer to give them a ride. Starkweather has them drive to Bennett, and then he shoots Jensen in the back of the head, and he rapes King before murdering her. He put their bodies in a storm cellar and stole their car. They drove the stolen car to an area of Lincoln where people with money lived, and it was upper middle class, and chose the home of a businessman named C. Lauer Ward. Lucky man.
Yeah.
There they broke in, killed his maid, Lillian Fenci, it's Fenci, and his dog, which he snapped its neck because he didn't want it to bark and alert them.
Right.
Then he waited for them to return home. Clara Ward, the wife, came home first. They stabbed her as they had Lillian, and then shot Ward when he returned later. So he just got shot. I'm like, why is he so lucky? That's terrible, but come on, versus being stabbed. They then stole his 1956 Packard, stuffing it with stolen items, mainly jewelry. The bodies of the Wards were found quickly, and the National Guard was called out. They were looking for Starkweather specifically, though I found no mention of why they knew it was him or anything like that. I'm pretty sure that there must have been involvement, like Fugate's family the grandma had called the police, so they knew that he was dangerous, and so they thought maybe it would be him. Starkweather knew the Packard would be hot because it belonged to the family, so they know it was missing, so he decides to ditch it. And they come across a Buick on the side of the road. And inside it was a traveling salesman named Merle Collison, who was sleeping. He was just catching up on some Z's so he could continue his drive. They were right outside Douglas, Wyoming at this point. Up until here, all the killings had happened in Nebraska. So he was Charles Starkweather's brother. One of his brothers lived in Oregon, and that's where he had decided to head, and that's why they were in Wyoming.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which is the longest part of that drive to Oregon, which I've made a billion times from Colorado to Oregon. He raps on the side window of Merle's Buick, and when the man awakens, Starkweather shoots through the window and then shoots the man and kills him.
Why do you have to wake him up to do that?
I don't know. For fun?
Apparently.
Because I'm pretty sure this is all for fun and pleasure. Then they get into the car, I guess with the body still in the car. So I don't know if he threw it into the back or what.
Okay.
But it had a parking brake, which was unfamiliar to Starkweather. He had not driven a vehicle with a parking brake, which I didn't know that was... it makes sense that would have been new at some point. So he tries to drive with it, and he can't figure out how to shut it off. And while the car stalls, and at this point, a geologist named Joe Sprinkle.
I love that name.
Great?
Hello,
and he was like
Mr.
an
Sprinkle?
older geologist, Mr. Sprinkle. He happened to be driving by. Of course, he sees two cars pulled over, and he's like, oh, I'm going to see if I can help them. He pulls over, and he asks if they need help. And Starkweather's, yeah, could you come over here and help me? I can't figure out this newfangled parking brake here. So Sprinkle comes over. Starkweather pulls out a shotgun, and they fight over it. Sprinkle was 6 foot something. He was a big man. He actually was much bigger than Starkweather. So he's putting up a good battle. And as they're struggling over the shotgun, a sheriff's deputy named William Romer drives by. Right? Just, there's nothing else to do in Wyoming if you're a cop, right? When he pulls up behind the cars, Fugate leaps out of the car and runs to him, screaming something along the lines, again, this Barry, he's going to kill me. It's Starkweather. It's Starkweather. He's crazy. He killed a man.
Or 12.
Yeah. So Sprinkle wrests the gun away. He actually gets control of the gun. So Starkweather jumps back into the Packard, which he can drive, and he takes off. Romer goes after him, the sheriff's deputy. He radios for help. A roadblock is set up by Chief Bob Ainsley and Sheriff Earl Heflin. Starkweather goes right through the roadblock. So those two men join the chase. I think they jump into one car with Ainsley driving and Heflin shooting out of the window, and they get up, they exceed 100 miles per hour. Which is just picturing like these Bonnie and Clyde style cars, right?
Yes.
But it's so yeah, they're going. Heflin manages a shot that shatters the rear window, and Starkweather gets cut. I think just on his hand and his ear, but there's all this blood, and he's freaked out. He's run out of ammunition, so he pulls over and he gives himself up. Yeah. Heflin was quoted as saying, I guess he thought he was bleeding to death. That's why he stopped. That's the kind of yellow son of a bitch he is. Starkweather later bragged they would never have caught me if I hadn't stopped. Well, they would have kept shooting at you because they weren't out of ammo there, bud.
Yeah.
The two get arrested. Starkweather was due to be tried for first-degree murder for Collison, the only Wyoming victim. Mm-hmm. The Wyoming governor, Millward Simpson, was against the death penalty and said he'd defer to Nebraska officials to try the two, as the bulk of the victims were in the other state. He also said, hey, I'll sign an extradition anytime you want me, in a jiff, he said. So while he was against the death penalty, maybe he wasn't so much against Starkweather getting it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Starkweather, unaware the governor of Wyoming was actually against the death penalty, also asked to be sent to Nebraska. Yeah. He didn't know.
He didn't do his homework.
Oh, he was dumb. His employers said he was. But anyway, Fugate went back and forth between sobbing hysterically and sitting in complete silence. They felt that she was in shock. At one point while crying, she said he'd made her sit in a car with a dead man. She also cried for her mother and asked why she couldn't call her parents. Sheriff Heflin ended up having her sedated. In the WyoHistory.org article written by Leslie Wishman wrote, at 19 years old, I just like this description, Starkweather was a swaggering, good-for-nothing in blue jeans and a black motorcycle jacket. A former garbage man known for yelling, go to hell at strangers. He was stocky and well-built, but small at 5'5". His normally red hair was now black with shoe polish. He wore rimless glasses and black and white cowboy boots. A James Dean wannabe, Starkweather was a rebel whose cause had developed into instilling fear and dissipating his own smoldering rage. I just enjoyed it.
Smoldering rage.
Smoldering. January 31st, 1958, the two were extradited to Nebraska. Starkweather's case was straightforward. His attorney put up the insanity defense, even though Starkweather kept refusing. And they found him guilty May 23rd. And he went to court in May, so pretty fast.
Yeah.
And he got the death penalty. Caril's case, of course, was far more complicated. She was a 14-year-old girl. When they first arrested them, Starkweather said she'd been a captive and had tried to escape him multiple times. Then he went back on it. He claimed that she'd been the one to stab Mrs. Ward to death and that his gun had locked up when he tried to kill Collison in his Buick, so she'd been the one to shoot the man. He even said she was the most trigger-happy person he'd ever met. Caril went back and forth between crying and screaming and being quiet as if she were in shock. Still, like this continued. Romer testified, and he was, again, I think he was the deputy who happened across them first. She told him in the beginning that she'd seen her family killed. She even gave details that proved that she'd seen them be killed, right? Even though after that she was claiming she didn't know her parents were dead and she wanted to talk to them and so on and so forth. So he didn't buy her, asking why she couldn't talk to her mom while in the sheriff's office. Heflin also said Caril had clippings of newspaper articles about her family's killings in her pocket. So both of those officers testified against her. So she had cut out the newspaper articles while they were on the run. So yeah, while they're on their little runaround thing, which was only a matter of days.
Right.
She collected the newspaper clippings. So yeah, they were like, nah, sorry. She knew that her family was dead.
Yeah.
And we're not buying that she wasn't part of it. Even worse, Charles Starkweather testified at her trial, and that's when he was like, oh man, she was joyful about this. She had fun. We had fun. She was part of these killings. She's ultimately convicted of murder and given a life sentence, November 21st, 1958, at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. She served her time quietly, never got in trouble, paroled in 1976. So they made it so she could be paroled. Charles Starkweather was given the electric chair at the Nebraska State Penitentiary at 12:04 a.m., June 25th, 1959. So again, not a huge... Now you sit on death row forever.
Yes.
Before you get killed. He was 20 at the time of his execution, and 19 when he committed his killing spree. He was buried in Wyuka, W-Y-U-K-A Cemetery in Lincoln, Nebraska, where 5 of his victims were also buried. His execution was the last execution in Nebraska until 1994.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently they weren't all that much for it either. Caril and Fugate has asked to be pardoned twice. Both have been refused. The second refusal came just this past year, February 18th, 2020.
Wow.
The panel that reviews these said what she wants is, to be emotionally cleared of this, and that's not something we can do for her.
Yeah.
Now married, her name is Caril Ann Clare. She has always maintained she was a hostage. The reactions of the victims' family members actually differ really widely on this latest rejection. They spoke to David Ellis. I don't know why I called him Devil. David Ellis, he was Carole King's cousin, the woman who was raped and murdered.
Okay.
And by the way, on that one too, one source said she was violently raped, and another source said he tried to and couldn't do it, so he killed her because he was angry. And so, I don't know.
Okay. Bit of difference.
Yeah, it's astounding, honestly, on this one, how different everything was.
Yes.
I imagine it's become such a legend in itself that everybody's got their own little story to tell. So anyway, Ellis was grateful she didn't get her pardon. He celebrated. You're out. You don't get to be considered innocent of what happened to my cousin and her boyfriend. The cousin, I think, was 16 or 15 when it happened, and the boy was only a year older than the girl.
Oh, God.
So Liza Ward, whose grandparents were the couple that were murdered with their maid and their dog, she fully believes that Fugate was an innocent hostage. Huh. She has met and talked to Caril Ann. They've cried in each other's arms. She thinks that she was a victim turned into a villain and that it's not fair. She actually published a book called Outside Valentine in 2004, which wraps in the murder of her grandparents. So, yeah, it was just a quick spree. But once he decided that he was ready to kill some people, he really just all in. Wow. He was more determined than he'd certainly ever been in his job.
Yeah. Well, so he just had to find what motivated him.
Fascinatingly, so on the yohistory.org, they had pictures, and I'm going to be posting one of those pictures. It's Caril Ann Fugate being walked in by 2 of the cops who had chased her down. One of them was a massive man, but then she was teeny. My daughter is her age. She's teeny, but her face is in such a teenage scowl walking between them. And I'm like, that's the face of a child who's pissed off that she's caught, that she's being taken in by these guys. And then when then there's just a still of her when she's sitting in the police station, and her face is blank. Again, shock. You never know how people are going to react to things. I just don't know what to buy about her situation. And even if she wasn't there when her parents were murdered, it doesn't mean she was an active part of anything else. There's been so many depictions of her. The first one I ever saw was Badlands with Martin Sheen, and is it Sissy Spacek in that movie? I don't remember. It's been forever.
That's going back.
Yeah, and then Natural Born Killers, of course, was inspired by that. They even have the scene with the comedian who's so loud and obnoxious and no respect.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Yes, plays her stepfather.
Oh.
Right? And then...
I didn't see it.
Okay. So, yeah, there's flashbacks or something like that, if I remember right. But, yeah, it's a total take on this. And then the press is after them, and Robert Downey Jr. is this awful, I think he's Aussie, if I remember.
Oh, God.
Media person who, to me, seemed kind of based on Geraldo, except Aussie. Because he was like, blah, 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 and he's just... just like Geraldo did when he was doing stuff, And then, Frighteners has a couple that are aspiring to be like them. And the girl
with
has
Michael
gotten...
J. Fox?
Yes.
Because I remember that, but not very well.
Yeah, so the female character, she has gotten scot-free, but she's unlike her mother keeps her trapped in the house or whatever.
Oh.
And then it turns out she was very excited, and it was actually part of these murders they perpetrated in this hospital. So, anyway, a lot of media representations of it. And it seems to me that most people who are representing it don't consider Caril and Fugate to have been an innocent hostage.
Huh. Well, and it's how can you know?
There's just
he's dead, and there's nobody who can really completely refute her story.
No, and
because again, 14 years old, that's a whole lot to take in a very short amount of time.
It is, but I also think that these cops would lean toward her being innocent, especially the way she ran at them.
Yeah.
And they tend to be pretty good at reading people. These weren't new
True.
cops. One of them even said later, and since there was no confirmation of this in any other way, I didn't initially put it in there, but he said that she even at one point talked about how they'd put some rope on her and had her rub her wrists together so that because they planned if they got caught that she would be able to say she was a hostage.
Oh.
But he's the only one who reported that. And there's no reports of rope burns on her wrists or anything. So I don't know.
And record keeping?
No.
Yeah.
And at that point, it would have all been sensationalized media reports, which I imagine is part of why... sources. Oh. That's the second time I'm totally thrown off because I didn't put them at the top of the page like I normally do.
Right.
So Wikipedia, biography.com, and YO History, and then KETV.com was one I used for her being denied pardon hearing, the recent one. And all the photos that I'm going to put up on the site, except for one, are from Casper College Western History Center from the YO History page. The other one's just, open source from Wikipedia, and it's his, if I put it up, it's his mugshot.
Well,
yeah.
That's what we got.
Yeah.
Wow, that is a love story gone wrong.
So much love that they then said the other one did all the...
yeah.
They were so in love that the parents were, not allowing her to go with him or whatever his story was. Sent them on a full killing spree that involved a 2-year-old.
Just
why? Was she crying and therefore she irritated him?
Well, if they didn't kill her, they had to take care of her.
Yeah.
That and bludgeoning the dog. That's just...
Yeah. Poor dog.
Oh.
That one bothered me so much. I was like, damn it. I know it's because you're trying to be a good dog.
And I don't do a whole lot of stuff where there's torture of animals or children are killed.
Yeah.
Because I just can't take it.
And those are the things, I've heard of them over and over again. I haven't seen Badlands since I was a teenager. This is an older film. I don't remember anything about the dogs being in there.
Right.
I certainly didn't remember anything about her 2-year-old half-sister.
No.
So, although maybe it's in Natural Born Killers. I don't know. I haven't watched that in a bit either.
And of course, when you have more information, you watch it differently.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I'm going to talk about Love Gone Wrong.
All right.
So this is about Earl and Dorothy Joudrie. My sources are the Canadian Encyclopedia.
Oh.
I did not even know such a thing existed. The Globe and Mail. A Hearthstone 4 WordPress site for the Joudrie family. And I got a little bit of a TV show called Crimes of Passion, which is, let me just say, very dramatized, very over the top. And I'm like, wait, I didn't hear that. No, what was your source for that fact?
Right.
So they want to play it up and make it as big a deal as they can. So, Earl Joudrie and Dorothy Jonason met in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada when he was 16 and she was 15. For anybody who's intimately familiar with Canada, that's Canada. It's in the western half of Canada. It's next to British Columbia.
Banff. It's near Banff, if you heard of the national
exactly.
park.
So they dated. So I don't think they began dating immediately, but they dated for 4 years before they married in 1957. So to me, that's significant because so many of they meet like Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
They meet, they fall in love, they run off together.
They do weird, crazy shit.
Yeah, when she's 15 and he's 17. No. They actually dated for 4 years before they got married. Reportedly, when they got married, they had $25 between them.
Wow, that's a good start.
So,
hey, $25 could buy a house. No, I'm just kidding. Not quite.
Even in Edmonton, no. So, when they separated in 1989, Dorothy's financial settlement was $1.9 million.
Ooh, I'm going to learn from them and do what they did. So
They lived in a 7,000 square foot home in an affluent neighborhood in Calgary, in Alberta. Earl was the chairman of Gulf Canada Resources Limited and Algoma Steel.
Ooh.
Now, I may be mispronouncing that. So he's really, those are the two. That's the job he is associated with that I started reading a lot about. It turns out he was sort of a business troubleshooter and a fixer, not in a bad way, but he had this ability to come into a business and see why it was failing. And he did a lot with railroads. There were some, what is the word I want? Utilities companies that he was very influential in getting them repatriated to Canadian ownership instead of American ownership. But he had this ability to come in and see what was wrong, see the big picture and know how to fix it.
Okay, so if he weren't some manner of psycho, all around...
Oh, he's not.
Oh, okay.
But wait, there's more. They had a very active social life. They attended church together. They sang in the church choir. They threw card parties. She was a high school teacher, but she also, as they moved up in social status, she did volunteer work for Easter Seals and the International Olympic Committee. They had vacation property in Hawaii. They liked to attend the Kentucky Derby.
Oh.
So they traveled a lot. They had some glorious trips. They did live in Kentucky for a while. And she was referred to frequently as a vivacious socialite. Of course. She was apparently, when they met, they went dancing, and she was a very vivacious and fun-loving girl. And he was very smart. He came from very poor beginnings. One of his mannerisms, which I find hilarious, was that in a business meeting, he chomped on a cigar. He never lit it. He'd be like, I'm just a farmer from the prairie, but here's what I think. And he was right. I mean, he had this innate sense. So they had a hard time having children. So they adopted a son. Then they had a daughter and had 2 more sons. So they had 4 kids. This is a weird thing. I know, I'm getting to the point, I swear, but I got to do the build-up. In 1971, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer of the lymph nodes, and he underwent this hugely experimental treatment that saved his life, but apparently there were 3 people in treatment and 2 of them died.
Ugh.
Yeah, so he didn't even tell his parents.
Because it's lymphoma, right? Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, that's slightly different.
Oh, okay.
Because that'll come back later.
Okay.
But he didn't even tell his parents that he was sick. And his wife moved with 4 small children to a motel room to be near, because it was somewhere in the United States that he was getting this treatment. So he's very big on this keeping secrets. After he recovered, they moved to Toronto for a few years. Then they moved to Kentucky for a few years. It was all with work, and he's always moving up, making more and more money. Then he wanted to spend more time with his children, so they moved back to Calgary so he could have more time to spend with his kids. And apparently, so this is what everybody's seeing from the outside, and they're living in the affluent suburbs. They're society people. But their personal lives were the word I used was fractious.
Ooh, that's a fun word. They
argued about everything. Anything and everything. A hand of cards. They argued. And apparently Dorothy was a big drinker. I mean,
well, she was a socialite.
And she drank Seagram's VO. So, I don't know why, but... So, when in the late 80s, when the kids were grown and kind of out, they separated. This was extremely difficult for Dorothy, whose entire life was centered on her husband and her children. It was her job to make the marriage work. And at first, they didn't tell anyone they had separated. He got an apartment in town and apparently said to his wife, "We're not going to tell anyone that I'm not living here anymore. We will keep the marriage going as far as anyone else is concerned. But I'm going to have this apartment in town." And which I'm like, that is an enormous secret to keep. Mm-hmm. And some of this is from interviews. Her best friend growing up wrote a book about the story of what happened. Eventually he moves to Toronto for work. And after he's been living in Toronto for a while, he moves in with a woman who is like Dorothy's cousin's daughter. It's a very distant relative that they didn't know well, and he didn't really know until he moved back to Toronto. But he didn't want anyone telling Dorothy that he was living with this other woman.
More secrets.
Both partners agreed that there had been physical abuse in the marriage, which...
Both ways?
Both ways. Now, what Earl said was that that Dorothy would pick a fight and it would devolve into pushing and shoving on both sides.
Gotcha.
And he also said he did strike her on several occasions and he took full responsibility for that. So that was his fault. It was his doing. So
it's nice that they brought children into that relationship.
Yes. Their eldest son also said he has memories of them hitting each other. Not of them hitting each other in the 70s, but not since then. And they both agreed. They both testified that he had not struck her since 1978. Uh-oh. So now you're thinking, now what do you mean made a statement? When did this happen?
Where are we going?
So in January of 1995, so they've been separated since the late 80s. So in January of 1995, Earl is living in Ontario. He visited Dorothy at her townhouse in Calgary to discuss finalizing their divorce. He brought the divorce papers. So they've been separated for years, but it's kind of been going on. And a very big point was made that while they were separated, he's still sending her cards and gifts. And not just a funny Ziggy card, but heartfelt cards and happy birthday and gifts. And she thought this meant the marriage was still going on. So he shows up, and apparently she's got all these. She has their wedding album on the table, and they have good memories together. Mm-hmm. But he tells her, I don't think he tells her that there's another woman, but he does tell her, "I've brought the divorce papers. We need to sign these and finalize it." So it's unclear whether or not she signed the papers. But as Earl was leaving, he went out through her garage. And she followed him and shot him 6 times in the back with a Beretta.
Well, was it self-defense?
Well, now, one report, I'm unclear on where the gun was, because one report said that she had put the gun in the garage. Another report said that she went from the kitchen to the bedroom, got the gun, and went to... And I'm like, what the fuck is he doing in the garage all this time? If it's in the bedroom, why is he going to hang out in her garage waiting for her to come back and shoot him?
He didn't think she was going to shoot him?
Yeah. So I think it was probably in the garage. So after she shoots him 6 fucking times, she goes back in the house at least once, possibly more than once, to freshen her drink.
Her Seagrams?
Her Seagrams. And she comes back out with the full drink, ice cubes clinking, swirling it around, and asked him, "How long is it going to take you to die?"
How many drinks will I need here, bub?
How long is this going to take? Earl is not dead. Earl is not dead.
Where is he shot? Did it say where he was shot?
At some point I have, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm like, what the fuck? You shoot him 6 times and you don't kill him. So he claims that her mannerisms and her voice were very different during this. That it was a very harsh voice. It was a very stilted. So he begged her and pleaded with her to please call the ambulance. And she finally agreed after he swore he would not testify against her in court. He kept his word. He kept his promise about not pursuing charges against her himself, although he did have to participate in the trial.
Okay.
And now the TV show had some details that I can't verify because I didn't see them anywhere else. But apparently there was an issue because she calls 911, which they called 911, because this was in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And now if you say that, it means something very different.
Yes, it means something very different. So, apparently she calls 911 and had to call more than once because when the ambulance first arrived, she still had the gun. Mm-hmm. And they can't go in the house while she has the gun. Yeah. So he's fucking bleeding out on the garage floor. And they can't come in, so they have to call the SWAT team. It takes her, she may have called 911 more than once. Like, would you please come get him?
Hey, why aren't you guys coming in?
So, she didn't threaten him. I mean, there was never any, so they get the gun, they come in, they cart him off. Earl never seemed angry with her for this. Never. Not when it happened, not afterward. He had a broken arm, a collapsed lung, and lived with a heart ailment for years as a result of the shooting, and carried 4 bullets still in his body for the rest of his life. During the right? So, and apparently there were a lot of jokes made about what a bad shot she was, and he was alive to hear them all.
Absolutely. She was pretty close to him.
Right?
I feel like you could accidentally kill somebody that close with one shot, but everybody has their bad days, I guess, seems to have been his viewpoint on her shooting him 6 times with a Beretta.
So, during the trial, at the very end of the trial, a nanny who worked for them came forward to testify about Earl's abuse of Dorothy, but nobody, including the children, could corroborate anything she said. Even Dorothy didn't corroborate that. I mean, it was like, yes, there was abuse, but it wasn't...
But we were slaying it both ways.
Yes. Yeah. So, anyway, the trial took over 2 weeks, and the jury then deliberated for 48 hours, which now seems quick and speedy.
Yeah.
But,
absolutely speedy.
So Dorothy was acquitted and found not criminally responsible, which is different than being found not guilty.
Right.
By reason of temporary insanity. Her lawyers argued she was in a trance-like state when she shot her husband. It's called automatism. And compounded by alcohol consumption and the fact that he was leaving her after 38 years of marriage. One of the things she said was, and this is a direct quote, "I had to have shot him because I was the only person there."
Okay.
But she insisted that she had no memory of the incident, and the judge ordered her into a psychiatric facility for evaluation. She stayed there 5 months and then was released.
What'd they say? Would they have anything to say about her?
Apparently they felt she was no longer a danger to anyone. So the divorce was finalized that summer, the summer of 1995, and Earl married the woman that he was living with in Toronto, and they lived a happy life together from all accounts. Dorothy, her life just sucked.
Could have been worse there, Dorothy.
Yes, but she had breast cancer. She tried rehab several times, and it never took. So she died of liver and kidney failure at the age of 66 in 2002. I mean, I can't think that's a pleasant thing to go through.
Yikes.
But Earl later developed Parkinson's disease.
Oh.
Then he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
That's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I get it.
Okay. So he died in 2006 at the age of 72. So neither one of them lived a whole lot longer. I mean, from 95 to 2002, so that was 7 more years for her and really 11 more years for him. But it was all focused on she could not let go of him.
Apparently. Even though they've been living apart for...
I know, when your husband moves to another... across the fucking country, and apparently at one point, Earl went on a vacation to Florida with whoever it was he was living with. I had her name, I don't remember it. And one of the kids had visited them and came home and said, oh, he went on vacation with Susie. And she called Earl and asked him, and he's like, oh, no. And I can't help thinking, if he had been honest about any of this.
Yeah, we're separated. I'm seeing some line. We're done.
Yes.
Although not always. I'm not going to...
No, but I know.
Yeah.
But I have known couples who separated, and they stayed that way for a number of years.
Okay.
Until one or the other of them found a relationship that they wanted to...
That it's worth getting... Well, yeah, and divorce is such a process, right?
Yes.
It's ugly. You often have to involve lawyers.
Yes.
It just builds and builds. There's it was an HBO show called Divorce with Jessica... Oh, no.
Alba?
Nope. The one who was in Sex and the City.
Sarah Jessica Parker.
There we go. And it really just shows that it's a surprise to one of them. I'm not going to... I don't know how much spoilers because I've been watching a while. But you see them going about it okay. And then it's like each little blow that may not even be intended as a blow by the other person, right?
Right.
Builds and builds. And then it's back and forth. And then it's, well, if you're going to be this way, I'm going to be this. And it just gets bigger, even when it starts okay.
And we all have friends who've been through divorce, and I have more than one who, if you go into a divorce and the other party has a lawyer and you do not, just bend over and kiss your ass goodbye.
You might as well just hand everything over,
because
including your children.
If they have a lawyer and you do not, you're gonna get screwed. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm saying get a lawyer, because there are some people who can handle it with mediation. There are some people who have amicable divorces. I know people who
exists.
It does exist. But yeah, it just seems like the alcoholism compounded her delusions that this marriage was someday going to come back together. I don't think he did her any favors by, letting her, by being dishonest and continuing to pay attention to her. I was looking for crimes of passion. And this came up and I was like, she shot him 6 times.
And is he just lays there on the floor? Does he try to crawl away?
I'm like, is he moaning? Is he yelling, ow?
He's just stoic. He's probably apologizing to her because he's Canadian.
Well, that was delightful. One delightful thing about this was when I was watching the TV show that I mentioned that covered this in an overly dramatic fashion, was the interviews with all the Canadians. I just love the accent.
Yeah.
It sounds like home.
That's right. Not too far off.
Alberta
is, but...
Yeah, well, yes. I could not find... Since then, other than when they died, I could not find any kind of updates. Nobody's gone back and re-looked at this. It was like...
the kids didn't even seem traumatized so much by... it was just their parents, right? They were used to them. They were obviously going to snipe at each other. They were going to hit each other until 1978. And it just was. That just seems like that's how everybody viewed it, except for apparently the nanny, but it just was. That was who they were, and that's what they were going to do.
It was really interesting to me, and I don't know if it was a conscious choice by the media. There was not a whole lot. Now, granted, the kids were adults, at least, of legal age, but they did not drag the children into it. And that was cited actually as one of the reasons why he did not pursue it. He was like, I'm not doing that to my children. I'm just going to let it proceed. I'm still here.
It was very adult.
Right?
How adults don't adult that often. She didn't adult.
No. No. And one of the oldest son said he only remembers them hitting each other one time, but one of the other kids was like, yeah, they did hit each other, but that ended when we were kids. And
I mean, it doesn't sound like either of them called the police on each other, which is, where they escalate it.
And I don't know. Also, it had more about his upbringing than hers that I could find. He grew up, his father was very abusive to both his wife and his son. And it was a very hard scrabble, very hard life. So yes, that was what he learned growing up, but it sounds like he did change. Man, but shooting him 6 times.
I'm just really mad at you. Yeah, it's work. And I think a lot of people who aren't psychotic, once that they see the effect of that first bullet, right? You hear that loud noise, you feel that impact of the gun in your hand. You see the person's face. You see blood bloom. Like, that would be it.
Yeah.
Because people, as a rule, are not actually that fond of hurting other people physically. Yes. But nah, she just kept going. This is for this, and this is for this.
Which does lend credence to the whole fugue state thing. That she wasn't reacting.
Yeah.
To seeing him.
I mean, if she was not otherwise this sociopath, right? Where drinking a drink, going in and refilling her drink.
That was weird. She did not seem to be a cold person. She seemed to be a very passionate person. I can't...
when my dad got quiet, that's when we were...
Yep.
Really? Oh, we're in trouble. Yep. There are people like that. Not that he was ever loud, but...
So, yeah.
If he was super quiet, you were in deep, deep shit.
She just looked like someone's grandma. When they were, the pictures of her going into her trial.
That's probably why a jury or a judge or whatever couldn't convict her, because it's like, look at her.
There was a strong case made for this automatism.
Did they say it was related to her drinking at all? Like that, because some people...
No.
There's a Kim Basinger movie where she supposedly goes into this fugue state and does things when she drinks too much.
No, it was just, they think it was him bringing the divorce papers. It was her finally realizing this marriage was over, and this marriage was her reason for living. That was her whole purpose in life, was to make this marriage work. And then it was just compounded by...
Which is so weird, because it didn't seem like she was fighting really hard for it. He was the one sending her stuff.
Yeah.
They were living apart. There's nothing that says that she was calling and being like, when are you going to come to me? Or,
Yeah.
So how...
And
I'm not sure I buy that this was her entire purpose for living, because she wasn't doing anything about it. But of course, maybe she was, and it just wasn't in the article.
She did come of age in the 50s.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think makes a difference.
Yes, but would even those women just sit there and not do anything and just...
I don't know. I don't know it, because it's hard for us to imagine, because neither one of us would sit still for that for longer than about 30 seconds. But if your husband tells you, okay, you're going to stay here and I'm going to go stay in the apartment in the city, and and they still went to social functions together. People didn't know they were separated because they still went to all this, did the social circuit together.
Gotcha. So they were seeing each other in person too.
Yes, while they were still in the same town.
Okay.
So
weird.
Yep. That's just love gone wrong.
Ain't it though? But then not that wrong, apparently. Like we're right around.
Oh, where we should be.
At the norm, the normie norm.
All right.
Okay, well, write to us with your stories.
Please.
About love gone wrong. Yeah, I know that there are stories from that era and beyond where, because on the one hand, women would take all of this shit. And on the other hand, all these people have a story. Oh yeah, my grandma just hauled off and clobbered my grandpa over the head with a frying pan, and then they just went on as if nothing had happened when he came to. Like that shit happen all the time. It's not just those stories.
Yes.
Again, you can email that to mysteriesmonstersmayhem@gmail.com. You can fill out the form on our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com. And you can go to our Facebook page and check out the sources there that we'll post and any pictures that we post.
Yep.
Thank
All
you
the
for
extras
listening.
in our sources. Yes, thank you so much for listening. Send us, and if your grandfather or if your grandmother did belch your grandfather with a frying pan and killed him, and he came back as a ghost, we want to hear that story too.
It's true. If Sasquatch was there watching the whole thing, we'd love to hear that. If Grandpa disappeared and was never found again, and Grandma was like, oh, I don't know, maybe he went to Cuba. He likes cigars. Then we want to hear that too. It's happened. I know it.
Okay. Everybody have a wonderful week, and you will hear from us again.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day.
Enjoy eating some Clarence chocolate on the 15th. Yeah.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.